Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's movie blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we've got some pretty crazy news when it comes to the movie theater industry. One theater is set to start the process of reopening within the next couple of weeks, while another is looking to potentially go not just bankrupt, but also possibly disappear altogether. And that is, of course, AMC Entertainment, as you can see up here, because they are seeing a massive, so far the preliminary report is that they're seeing losses in their first quarter of 2020 up to $2.4 billion on write-downs in the report. So again, a loss of $2.4 billion. That's an insane amount of money for them to lose. And obviously some might say, well, aren't they going to get some of that money back because of government subsidies? Yes, but not $2.4 billion worth, because as I mentioned on last night's stream, you can get money to stay afloat, to be able to pay off the basic things that you need to. But the nature of any business is not to remain static, it is to grow. And businesses that either lose money or remain static end up going under in the end because the industry is, of course, constantly moving forward. So AMC has been stuck and in many cases has actually been falling behind and falling back because it was already in financial straits before the lockdown went into place. So obviously I know there's some people that every time I talk about AMC Theaters, they are happy because it's a Chinese-owned company. And look, I can understand the thought process going towards, China-owned and the Chinese communist government. But at the end of the day, what I see when I look at these movie theaters are, one, the people that work at the theaters, the workers that are going to be losing jobs. Keep in mind, AMC is the largest theater chain here in the United States, which means it is one of the highest employers of people that work at theaters. So imagine that's thousands of people that will be out of a job. So obviously, I just want you to keep that in mind next time you mock AMC. Again, there's people, actual real-life people, innocent people that are going to be impacted and affected by this. So that's one thing. And then, of course, secondly, it is that largest chain of movie theaters, and someone that personally likes going to the movies and loves the movie theater going experience, despite the fact that it has been very flawed ever since the age of cell phones. I grant you that. It is still something that is sad to see that a potential giant in the movie-going industry could potentially not exist by the end of the lockdown. And it is just very sad altogether. So let's go ahead and dive into this report a little bit. And before we get into some seemingly positive news with at least another theater chain. So giant exhibitor AMC Entertainment said it expects to report ballooning losses between $2.1 and $2.4 billion for the first quarter ended in March on one-time charges compared with losses of $130 million the year before. As I mentioned, they were already in financial straits before, again, last year in 2019. But look at this comparison, $130 million in losses versus $2.1 to $2.4 billion. So, of course, it's no surprise, as is reporting, unfortunately, by CNN, that AMC Theaters has substantial doubt that it can possibly remain in business. So as we're just going to go into here, it says AMC Theaters, the world's biggest movie theater chain, said on Wednesday that it has substantial doubt it can remain in business after closing locations across the globe. The company also said its revenue fell to $941.5 million, which was down 22% from $1.2 billion in the same quarter of last year. This quarter, the situation has gotten substantially worse. We are generating effectively no revenue. Again, so basically staying at a static level. And again, as I said, a business that stays static is a business that just really cannot survive. AMC will continue to monitor the potential lifting of various government operating restrictions, but added that the chain has serious challenges even if restrictions are lifted that include studios holding back new films from being shown. Even if governmental operating restrictions are lifted in certain jurisdictions, distributors may delay the release of new films until such time that operating restrictions are eased more broadly, domestically and internationally, which may further limit our operations. And of course, this makes sense for studios to do that. Studios put a lot of money and a lot of investments into their films. They want to be able to get a return on that investment. And if there's still restrictions telling people you got to wear a mask, you got to get your temperature checked, and people don't want to have to deal with any of that nonsense, that means the number of people is going to be lower. Not to mention, many theaters are going to be limited to 25% capacity, 50% capacity, which is already going to cut into the numbers of those new releases. And so it makes sense to me that a studio, at least with their larger, bigger budget films, would want to say, let's wait for things to normalize and then release it to get a bigger payday, since we get about 90% plus of the box office revenues in those first 2 weeks. But at the end of the day, it's the movie theaters that they need to survive that are going to be ending up suffering from that. So I really hope that the studios and the movie theater chains are able to work out some type of deal that benefits both of them, because the studios do indeed still need theaters. Obviously, with the age of everything going on demand and the experiment that's done by Universal that seemed to be very beneficial and seem to be a success. If you look at the numbers that Universal made from Trolls World Tour, it pales in comparison to the numbers that they've gotten on similar films in the box office, right? And so I think that that is something that we need to keep in mind, because they do still split revenues on the digital space. It's about a 70-30 split between Apple, iTunes, Apple, Google Play, all those different distributors. They get about 30% for hosting the material if it is a rental, and then the theaters, or rather, sorry, the studios would get about 70% of the revenue there versus a normal 60-40 split, but that's after getting 90% of the first two opening weekends. So it's still a much better financial investment for the studios to be able to have their films being shown in theaters. And so again, I'm hoping that they're able to work something out. And one theater chain they might be able to actually do some things, actually work some things out with would be, of course, Cinemark. I've mentioned this on the channel several times. Cinemark is the chain that seems to have has the most sense. It seems to have the most stable approach to all of this. Has been the only theater chain, again, other than AMC or Regal, that has said, here are the dates that we're looking at. I haven't even heard anything really from Regal other than July was the month they were looking at. But obviously, as I mentioned earlier, a couple days ago, I forget the exact date of it, I mentioned that Cinemark was going to be having a phone call talking about the potential of reopening, and sure enough, I was right. They are indeed talking about the window of when they plan to reopen, and of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Tenet is still being pegged to be released on July 17th, and as it says here, Warner Brothers and Nolan are very optimistic that it will stick to that date, and again, Nolan is not going to have that film released on demand. He wants that film to be in theaters, and if Nolan has his way, it will be on July 17th, come hell or high water. So let's go and dive into what Cinemark says. Cinemark CEO Mark Zoradi remained confident this morning on the exhibitor's Q1 call that Warner Brothers and Tenet will remain on track for July 17th, while Solstice Studios' Unhinged will be the first new wide-release movie in the theaters that are open on July 1st. Tenet, with a production budget of $200 million, reps the first major studio tentpole, which has exhibition hopeful about moviegoers' return en masse to the cinema. I hope the same thing, because as I've mentioned previously, I would love for movie theaters to continue. I think they need to adapt. I think they need to change. I think they need to raise the movie-going experience, but I still want them to exist. We've been in close contact with Warner Brothers, and they remain optimistic and positive, as well as Christopher Nolan, about the July 17th opening, said Zoradi on the call. Of course, it depends on the continued positive movement due to the decline of COVID cases, which obviously one could easily make the argument that with all these riots going on across the country, that we could see another influx, another rise, which could potentially throw a wrench in this system and government restrictions being reduced. Zoradi continued to emphasize that even with reduced auditorium capacities at 50%, we can operate profitably with all the safety techniques we put in place. But that is assuming that you actually get to 100% of the 50% capacity. This is something that maybe some people aren't realizing. You hear 50%, you say, oh, that shouldn't be too hard. But think about how many movies that you've gone to, especially, not as popular films or films that are older. How often has your theater been half full? Because if you get to half capacity, that means that you're at 100% of that half capacity. But if you're at anything less than that, and I think that Cinemark on an earlier call said that they could run between 20 and 30% capacity and still be profitable, also take that into account as well. How often have your theaters across the country been even to that capacity? Not to mention, you're going to have people not as apt to go to the theater because of fear of, obviously, the beer bug. And this is, to me, the most interesting part of the entire thing. It says here that should Warner Brothers change the release date for Tenet, Zoradi told investors and analysts that the chain's phased reopening plan between June 19th and July 10th can be shifted and is flexible. And so I think that's the biggest thing there, is that finally, as I mentioned before on this call, they were going to be talking about, what the plans were going forward, putting some more concrete stuff. And so basically starting as early as June 19th, depending on where you are in the United States, Cinemark will be reopening. So again, it's a phased reopening. So theaters over an extended period of time will be opening over that several, few week period. And so I know I'm personally excited. I don't really know if there's any major Cinemarks near me, but just the fact that we're only really a couple of weeks away from the first Cinemarks reopening here in the States is pretty damn exciting. And I'm really hoping that Regal comes behind very soon and says, okay, we're going to start to reopen, because I do know there's a major Regal property and a major Regal theater near me. And unfortunately, because as I mentioned earlier, AMC, I just don't really know at this point, because when you're reporting billions of dollars in losses and a static and stagnant economic growth, and you're talking about saying, hey, I don't think that we're going to be able, I have a lot of doubt that we can actually remain in business. I don't know if we're going to hear about them reopening. I don't know if they're going to try and reopen some theaters to try and make some of their money back, or if they'll be able to, go in with all of these restrictions that have been in place depending on where they are in the country. So yeah, it's really crazy times. Again, AMC, as I've mentioned, I've been made very clear on the channel, full disclosure, I used to work for an AMC for about 3 years. Was able to grow to the level of being a supervisor at one of my the location I worked at, and just love the company overall. I love the people that I worked with. It was a very interesting experience. It's something that if I could have done both that and teaching at the same time, I probably would have, just because, again, I love the movie going experience so much. And so this definitely hurts me a lot more. And again, if you're going to be one of those trolls in the comments saying, well, it's owned by China, so good, I'm glad it's going out of business. Just remember that there are several workers, again, I used to be one of them, that will then be out of the job. And having remembered a lot of the people that were still working there when I left, who had been working there for many, many years, either because they were retired and it was a great job to have in retirement, or because it was one of the few jobs that they were trying to work, it was able to offer them the most flexible hours and be able to offer them, really the best rates that they were able to get because of their education or because of anything else. It is still a very major industry that helps a lot of people. And so please keep all of that trollery out of the comment section, because you're forgetting the actual lives that are going to be impacted by this major decision. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. Do you think that AMC is going to be going under? And also, are you excited? Do you live near a Cinemark? If your local Cinemark opens June 19th, will you be there that first weekend to see what's going on, to see the restrictions that are put in place? Are you willing to wear things like a mask? And I know not everyone is willing to do that because they want to be able to go and experience it and have fun and not have something on their face. And some people obviously wear glasses and it fogs them up. Again, I think those are all valid criticisms, but I know for me personally, again, I am that person that would want to go back to the theater and see what it's like and see what the crowds are like, and just to see what this new way of going to the movies is going to be like, because it's probably going to be like that for at least a few months, as things get better and as we find out more information. So let me know your thoughts about this and everything I talked about in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, hit that subscribe. It helps out a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless. And now a huge shout out to all of my June Patreon members: Albertus Magnus, Animation Commentator, Brian P., David Bobrizik, Dion, Divex, Enrique Evangelista, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Frank the Tank and the Shawhan Wiener Dog Clan, Harold Francis, the Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jeffrey Toon, Kenneth Cameo, Lady T, Laura Story, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mike Jackson, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, Orange Hat Reviews, Outpost Dyer, Out of Step with Reality, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Steve Glasker, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, The DJD Show, and Tina B. And also to my Subscribe Star members: Edgardo Martinez, John B., Perpetual Punster, Robert Revo, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, G2 Cool 99, Darkstar 57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, Harold Francis, J. Rod, the Beer Guru, and also Nebanon G. Adams and ZK Man. Thank you all so much for being a member of Patreon and Subscribestar. And seriously, it really does mean a lot. Helps keeps the light on, helps me able to do things like the giveaways for my $5 and up backers on Patreon and Subscribestar, and also be able to put more stuff into the actual channel itself, including upgrading different components, whether it be webcams, microphones, things like that. All of that helps to support it, and it really does mean a lot. So thank you all so very much. Please, if you want to have your name shouted out or look at any of the other perks, which include things like indeed having access to exclusive 4K digital giveaways every single month, and also an exclusive podcast hosted on Patreon and Subscribestar, and also YouTube memberships as well at the $10 and up level, featuring John the Flick Pig Flickinger. Please check all of those things out in the description of this video. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.